fragrance. This was my first dive into designer and into niche fragrance houses. Before this point, I had pretty much only ever gone to stores to buy whatever I thought at the time smelled good enough to bring home. Never really understanding that there was a whole lot more to fragrances in general, and that there is just a whole world out there in terms of what different houses do, their kind of objective in the space, and the fact that each house could have different types of typical ways of putting together fragrance that could be completely different than anything that the other houses would smell like. Before this, I used to buy just from, regular store outlets like TJ Maxx and things like that, and just grab things out of the bin or the aisle shelves or in the glass containers if I was feeling particularly lucky. But during COVID, I'm sure everyone can say that during COVID they picked up a new hobby or something specific to kind of keep the time going. For me, I fell into the hole of fragrances around this time. Leave it to YouTube to suggest to me a fragrance video. And what do you think it was? I did buy into the hype of people talking about fragrances and what fragrances are their favorite in videos. And hearing people talk about listing off the notes and how it makes them feel is such a powerful thing that I went out to buy the Masterpiece fragrance, So They Would Have You Call It. Now, this fragrance is, for all intents and purposes, a masterpiece in my eyes as well. But when I first bought this fragrance, I did not think it was anything of the sort. I didn't think it was anything special. In fact, if I just smell the cap now I think it smells incredible. I think it smells incredibly complicated, incredibly French, as some would say. It just has so many notes that all blend together so incredibly well that you can't really pick up where one note starts and ends and where another note begins. I think that is part of what makes this fragrance undoubtedly a masterpiece. It's every note in it is so completely blended, and it takes you on a journey that just feels so completely together as an experience that you can't help but assume that it doesn't really, get a whole lot better than that for what this fragrance at least is trying to do. And that is true. Now, why did it take so long for this fragrance to catch me? Why was this so difficult to get my nose into? Well, I think it only takes listing off some of the notes and how the fragrance kind of smells to my nose to put that into perspective for you. So, to start, this fragrance is called Dior Homme Intense, and the homme in this is French for man. So, right off the smell it, you're given kind of a window into what to expect, and it does not meet those expectations. Because the world that we live in now, there's a lot of expectation for a man to smell typically clean, fresh, and to have a lot of masculine tones to the fragrance, whether it's things like, vetiver, or woods, or, oak moss, leather, all of these kinds of things, musks. There's so much that you would assume from seeing a fragrance that is simply called man intense. But this was blended at a different time when the definition of what a man should smell like was being reborn anew for the House of Dior. And when this was formulated, it was trying to take a completely different approach to what a man should smell like. Beforehand, you would see other fragrances that would typically use a lot of aromatics, a lot of fresh, bright citruses and things like that, and you still see that today, but with some different body and some different cores to them. But a lot of barbershop-y type bases, oak moss, perhaps some light woods, but really it was just a very fresh, bright, floral, aromatic, and clean type of scent before this. Dior Homme Intense starts off with the top and most forefront note of iris, which many describe to be a very lipsticky, waxy, makeup-y kind of, you would open someone's purse and smell a lot of makeup-y type waxy scent to it, a bit floral as well. That would be the definition of that iris note that is in this fragrance. There are other iris notes that are much more soapy and powdery. This is more lipsticky, waxy, makeup-y, and that immediately does not necessarily ring true as what you would think a man would smell like. Now, I've done enough fragrance collecting in my time to remove those notions of what should be worn by who. I think anyone can wear anything as long as it makes them feel happy and as long as it's something that they feel confident wearing. I think that is where the discussions should end when it comes to who should wear what fragrance. If you get enjoyment out of it, that's all that matters. But the rest of these notes kind of settle around that iris note. To my nose, I pick up a lot of sweet, but at the same time, very, very difficult to explain notes. Lots of aromatics in here as well. So, not quite, distinctly herbal, but just something that fills a lot of space in the fragrance and has a lot of mystique to it. Dior fragrances typically are this way. They're typically very difficult to parse out each of the singular notes because they're so blended, and they typically, at least in the old times, nowadays they like to list as few notes as they possibly can, but in the old days they would list notes like no other. There'd be so many notes that you could hardly even fathom where one would start and blend into another because there's just too much to think about with your nose. But to my nose, I get that iris. Let's remind ourselves here. I get vanilla. I get those aromatics in there, a lot of somewhat light or herbal notes. I get some light little bits of wood, but a lot of chocolatiness as well. So it's a very, very sweet, very lipsticky, makeup-y, floral, aromatic, slightly woody, chocolatey type fragrance. So it's very seductive, very metro, could lean either way depending on the person wearing it and the occasion that they're wearing it in. Now, what do I mean by it could lean either way if you're not a fragrance junkie? Well, fragrances typically can lean masculine, they can lean feminine. Sometimes they can sit right in between and be very unisex. And I would say this is very unisex. Some would say it leans way too feminine to ever wear as a man. And that I think is fair if that does not make them feel comfortable. But I think if you wore this as a confident man dressed up in a nice suit, or if you were wearing it with a collared shirt, maybe tucked in, with just a semi-casual kind of outfit, and you were, out at a date somewhere with someone, I think this is perfect for that. It's a perfect date night fragrance, as they would call it. Why? Because typically those sweeter, kind of more complicated and otherwise challenging fragrances to wear, I think really shine in a date night setting. They give intrigue. They can do a lot of talking for you, and I think that potential dates can really bring out a lot of good character as opposed to wearing something relatively tame. Now, additionally, I think that sweet fragrances work well for a date night because people want to get, a bit more intimate, a bit closer. They want to feel comfortable. They want to feel welcomed. And I think a lot of typical day wear fragrances just want to smell good to someone when they're walking by or when they're, close to you for a little bit. But they don't really invite people. They're not warm. They're not, comforting, inviting, and sensual in that way. They just don't say as much. I think a warm, vanilla, chocolatey, slightly woody, but overall just very comforting, inviting, warm fragrance like this will really set that mood for a date night so much better. But of course, all of this is opinion, and I think that if someone wanted to wear this in the daytime, male or female, or anyone in between, I think this fragrance can say a lot of words for people that maybe don't like to say a lot of words to explain themselves, or maybe they don't like to dress to explain themselves, or their vibe. I think this says a lot about someone's vibe very, very quickly. To me, I think it just really rings out as confidence. I think no matter who you are, you have to be very confident to wear this, because if you're a man, I think it's very easy to potentially feel as if you're either more in touch with your feminine side, or maybe could feel a bit unconfident if you're not ready to wear this fragrance. This fragrance might wear you, it might walk all over you. But if you're a confident guy wearing this, people will feel that confidence on you. It will feel incredibly cool and incredibly just confidence boosting, and you will feel very secure to those around you. Now, if you're a woman wearing this, or anyone in between, I think that this will give you somewhat of a masculine edge. I think that this fragrance has just enough unisex or slightly masculine leaning notes to it that for those on the feminine side, I think it would push you closer to that unisex or closer to that masculine side, just because the way that it's formulated is so deep compared to typical women's fragrances that it's a bit more, well, by the namesake, intense than what you would typically find in a woman's fragrance. Now, that's not a bad thing at all, and in fact, there are a lot of ladies out there, or non-binary pals in between, that do like to wear fragrances that might be a little bit more forward, and I think that this is great for them. I think truly on any side of the fence it just breathes confidence into that person, and I think that is what is magical about this fragrance. Again, the reason that I find that this fragrance is a masterpiece now is because you don't really get a lot of fragrances that have a unique scent profile that feel this deep, rich, complicated, and beautiful, and fragrances that say that much about people and can augment someone's look that much or vibe that much just by wearing it. A lot of fragrances nowadays, you wear them and you just, oh, alright, I put on a fragrance, I smell relatively clean and fresh. Or if you're, wearing a typical woman's fragrance, it's, a lot more sweet, perhaps floral, bright, maybe some citrus at the top still, and it projects a ton. But I think this fragrance says so much, and it says it with so much class, that it really is the masterpiece that everyone says it is. But it is very hard to wear, and it is very complicated for a new nose. So if you're looking to buy your first fragrance or really start to dive into the fragrance world, I would leave this until you've smelled a lot of fragrances, because I think it takes a lot of understanding about what a lot of the world of fragrances does smell like, from the cheap to the designer to the niche end. It takes a lot of understanding and a lot of being able to decipher notes and general know-how of what the fragrance would wear like or where to wear it. It takes a lot of that experience to understand why this fragrance is so special.